Drafting a team in the $35 Superflex Best Ball Tournament on FFPC and talking about our slow draft in the FFPC Main Event. That's what we're doing today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. And Shawn, in about a minute here, we're going to start a Superflex Best Ball draft. This is our first one of the year together. I'm excited about it. We got the 105. We always have a good time with these because you like to push QB as long as you possibly can in these guys. I always get a little nervous, and this is one of the things that where we kind of sometimes have a little, not like disagreement, but we have a little bit of like different approach, I guess, at times. But no, it'll be a fun one. And we also, while we wait, I'm sorry, we got the 102 after it reloaded. So now the question is, are you going to pass on all the good quarterbacks? Are you going to want to take Jamar Chase at the 102 or Brock Bowers at the 102? We also have our slow main event that we want to update the people on. But yeah, we're about to start here at the 102. We'll get into that as we go. How you doing?
Good. And Ben, people are figuring this format out after the true superstars go. Then mostly it's wait till round 3, which is certainly what the Roster Construction Explorer recommends, has recommended for years. But the best possible way to start is to take a star QB and then wait for like 5 rounds. So who do you like here? Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Allen goes 101. This is a really tough one. We took Daniels over Jackson, I think, in one of our mains. Is that right?
We did.
I mean, I love them both. We'll
grab some Lamar Jackson there. So we've got all 3 now of the elite QBs covered in our first 3 drafts.
Yeah, I like that. We grabbed Lamar there. I like him for best ball a little bit more. I was going to say Lamar because I feel like the Washington offense, a little bit more concentrated, Terry McLaurin, kind of the guy. There's potential for some other guys to be interesting this year. With the Ravens, there's a lot of ways to play it. I know you're kind of interested in Isaiah Likely a little bit later. We talked about Rashad Bateman a little bit. He just got a new contract. He's a classic better in best ball type. I don't really love him in managed. He feels like a little bit of a roster clogger because of the routes issues, some of that stuff. When he hits, though, he's going to hit on some big plays, some long touchdowns. He's going to have some spike weeks. I don't want to have to deal with trying to get him into a set lineup situation. Love him as a best ball stack option with a Lamar Jackson in the later rounds. There's a lot of ways we can play the Ravens. So this is a fun first pick.
There are. And then I have a hard time with both Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. That's really not a huge problem for redraft. I don't think it's actually a huge problem for best ball either, but certainly, and especially in Superflex, right? Where in Superflex, one of the dynamics is you're just simply not playing as many receivers. And so this element of having to hit on these stacks in the playoffs is less pronounced. I'm certainly not saying that you couldn't still benefit from that. At the same time, everything you were saying there about the Ravens being easier to play, better for best ball, completely agree.
And so we take Lamar at the 102. The draft is all the way down to the 112. 30-second clocks in this one. It's nice to be at the turn. Gives us a little chance to talk. And then as the picks come at the turn, we'll fire off 2. Quickly, we'll have to figure out our decision. Sometimes we need the full minute when there's the longer clock. Sometimes we need more than a minute. But yeah, the first 4 picks were QBs. We got Joe Burrow as an auto pick at 107. Patrick Mahomes, the only other QB that somebody's actually clicked on at 111. Chase went 105, Bijan 106, Bowers 108, Jefferson 109, Gibbs 110, Lamb and Nakua 112 and 201. Barkley, that means, fell all the way to 202. Get a little bit of a different order of the non-QBs when you mix in the QBs. It's one of my favorite things about Superflex. You start to get all the positions mattering, and you get some different valuations as well. You get people really willing to grab their guy. Jahmyr Gibbs at 110, that's my guy. I'm going to take him, even if Saquon's on the board. You don't see that as much with the non-QBs guys kind of stick in their ADP pockets more. Saquon 202 here. McCaffrey, Ginty can't come off 203 and 204. Yeah, not a lot of QBs early, like you said.
And really the only other one expected to come off before we draft is Baker Mayfield. We get a double elite tight end to start. That's something else that I don't think maybe is as advantageous in Superflex as it might be in the regular format. Baker Mayfield does go there in the middle of round 2. Then ADP projects that Devon Achane and Drake London would be a couple of the guys we could be looking here at the turn. We like both of them, especially in Superflex, where again, you're losing that one position potentially. One of the things that happens in this tournament and happened for the winner last year, I do believe, is that, I mean, you can play non-QBs in that Superflex spot. I was going to say Achane and even Bucky Irving together would be a kind of fun play in this tournament. Certainly if we don't like the other guys, we can take a second QB here at the turn. The 4 or 5 turn, and again, I said the really power play is to wait for round 6, but CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, those guys are going at the 4 or 5 turn. So again, I don't know that we have a ton of pressure really at any position here as we come up. What are you seeing?
You just ran out our whole clock and we auto-picked Brian Thomas.
Perfect. I didn't think he was going to possibly be an option.
You were talking through all this stuff. I was like, he knows the clock's running down, right? I was waiting for it. The 30 seconds get us there. No, yeah, the fact that he made it all the way back.
What happened was I thought we were the 101.
So we grabbed Brian Thomas. I honestly would have been who I suggested. That's why I didn't stop you. I was like, oh, we're going to auto the guy I kind of like here. Knicks goes at the 2-3. Might have been the QB you were referencing if you wanted to go QB. I'm open here with this 302. Achane did come off. Do you like
I think
London
this is
here?
London or Irving for me. Do you have a preference?
Let's do London. I like that. I like, we're drafting early. I like getting exposure to the later running backs. It's nice to start with some receiver firepower in best ball. We know that. Brian Thomas, Drake London, really nice 2-3 turn with Lamar. Thomas making it all the way back. After Genty went 204, McBride went 205. You mentioned a double tight end start there. Malik Neighbors went 206. Mayfield did go. Henry, Amon-Ra, Devon Achane were the 3 picks before us, but it did mean that Brian Thomas made it all the way back to us at 211, as you mentioned. We didn't really expect. We got him there.
Bo Nix and Meek value, but it feels like a pretty big deal in this area of the draft.
It feels like a tier break that we kind of got fortunate to be in front of. Bo Nix and Nico at the turn. Nico would have been interesting at 302 as well. And was Nix the guy you were kind of alluding to when you mentioned maybe getting another quarterback there?
Yeah, I mean, I think either Nix or Kyler Murray is a good fit for this type of tournament where I think even more in the Superflex where it's taking out a little bit of that stack-oriented element that having 2 mobile QBs, 2 hybrid guys where they could easily get the points you need without having to drag along a receiver necessarily. Not that they couldn't, but that would have been certainly ideal.
Fun pick here from the Bowers McBride start. He goes George Kittle at 308. We got a 3 tight end start in a super flex draft. Now you're chasing at every other position. I think it's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out. Caleb Williams, Kyler did go right after us. Caleb Williams goes at 310, but still only, Fields goes right behind him at 311, but still only 7 QBs since, and now Dak goes 312. So,
and this is the area where they do just tend to come off boom, 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 boom all together.
Yeah, Stafford goes there 401. So 4 in a row here, but between 104, the first 4 picks were QBs, but 105 and 310. There were only 5 QBs in Superflex. All those other elite receivers, running backs, the 3 tight ends come off. As you mentioned, it was nice to get Thomas there because it feels like a little bit of a tier break. A few more non-QBs go in that next little stretch. But as we start to get into that range that you're outside of the elites at all the other positions, QBs are really coming off. Herbert goes 402 to a drafter who took Mahomes 111 and Fields 311. So has 3 QBs through 4 rounds. That's the drafter that got Saquon. So that's an interesting start as well. In this format, 5 straight quarterbacks around the turn there. Both the 11 and 12 took back-to-back QBs.
Then you got to watch in this particular tournament for people to do pretty squirrely stuff that won't work for them, but also can cause a problem for you as you're trying to win the tournament.
That's right. It definitely throws a wrench in things when people like the tight end thing. It's like, well, maybe we were hoping to get a tight end value, but now everyone else is going to be like chasing at tight end a little bit, right? And so it starts to it's going to make the room interesting for tight ends. We'll go ahead and make this next pick, and then I was going to take a peek at our main event, the slow main that we're doing, that we alluded to during our fast main on our last episode, our live main that we did. We talked a little bit about our slow main. We had done, I think, 4 picks: Trey McBride, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, and Josh Allen. We are now in round 15, so we can update kind of the next chunk of picks. As it heads back towards us, Drake May goes, Jared Goff goes, Brock Purdy goes. We have now had the big quarterback run. The ADP values are, again, non-QBs. What are you liking here?
Yeah, well, we haven't been very high on Breece Hall for this season, but that might be an interesting pick. I think that taking Sam Laporta on one of these 2 picks is fairly straightforward. Maybe just grab him with the first one.
That was a name that I liked, and I agree. I was going to say let's grab him first because I didn't want to push him around the turn because I feel like the rest of it is flat. The non-QBs right now, we have Breece, we have Garrett Wilson. JSN just went right before us. James Cook, Marvin Harrison, Terry McLaurin, Devonta Adams, Omarion Hampton, Rashee Rice. A lot of good names there. Breece does go at the turn. There's also CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence. That's where we're at QB. But Laporta felt like a nice pick here because tight end is going to get tricky. I liked that call. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson at the turn does take off. It's tough that that draft took both of them. I would have liked to get one of them coming back. I'm open. I mean, I might go Rashee Rice here, but I think you like Xavier Worthy a little better.
I really like the guys at the next turn non-QB as well. Why don't we take a QB? Do you have a preference?
Okay. Yeah. I don't have a strong one, but Stroud or Love is fine. Okay. We grabbed CJ Stroud there. That's we were running down the clock, but I like that. I like that move, especially because you're looking at the ADP. And I was going to ask, it seemed with a little bit of a QB run, it's still like Stroud and Love are 2 names that still felt like they could be considered in that Purdy Goff tier, stretching even back to the last turn with Dak and Stafford. I'm certainly fine betting on 2 QBs, either of those 2 that we really liked last year that didn't necessarily have the year that we wanted. They're more pocket passing types. You do need the big passing numbers. I think there's some potential for both of them to potentially rebound in 2025. So we did take Stroud there.
And one of the things I was seeing, Travion Henderson is the guy who by ADP would come to us at the next turn. I think that he is a priority pick. You could have someone like a Kenneth Walker fall to the next pick. You can certainly still take a third QB at the next pick, in part because I don't think we've got a lot of clarity right now on who the good late picks are. And that's a big part of this tournament. You might prefer to wait. And even if they get more expensive, you also get a little bit more insight into how some of that will work when you're drafting this tournament, say, late July, August. At the same time, then one of the things we're setting up here is taking all of these rookie running backs that we really like. Mm-hmm. Hawkinson, somebody else who could potentially come to us at the next turn. Depending on how, again, this board kind of develops, having him as well would put us in a position where we were golden. All the other teams that don't have the 3 tight ends early would be in a little bit of trouble. With those 2, I really like at this point that we got Thomas and London to start because it actually gives us a ton of flexibility to pursue some things we like at this time of the year.
I love the notes about the running backs we could see at 6-7, whether that be potentially Walker falling or Travion Henderson. The running backs we were looking at if we didn't take Stroud by ADP or James Cook and Omari and Hampton. I mean, Hampton definitely an interesting name, but the trade-off from Hampton down to Henderson, since we took the Stroud pick, Lawrence, Love, and JJ McCarthy all go in that round, and you really do get now 21 QBs have gone. There's still several picks before we get back to us at 6'11". We're at 6'03" right now. As I say this, the top QBs by ADP, and there goes Michael Penix at 6'03". Top QBs are Tua, Bryce Young, Geno, and you get to Cameron Ward, you get to Sam Darnold, you get to Anthony Richardson, who's got the shoulder thing. Those are you start to get to those teams that's where like we don't know who's going to play. We don't know who's going to play the bulk of the year for Indianapolis. For the Giants, Russell Wilson is the next guy. Aaron Rodgers comes in after that. He's probably a little undervalued at this point, having just signed. Then you have the Saints. You got Tyler Shuck. I mean, it's Cleveland comes in later than that. There's 4 or 5 teams right now that you don't really want to be worrying about it, at least at this point in the offseason, or maybe all offseason. There's several teams that seem to be kind of just punting the position in 2025, like organizationally. So it's a little bit different this year with a weak rookie class. It hasn't really panned out. Trayvon Henderson and Kenneth Walker both go. Hawkinson goes. So that part of the plan, Sean, maybe not hitting the way we would like it to, although Omari and Hampton's still there, even though Henderson went. Tua, Bryce Young were 1 pick away. This person has been took Alvin Kamara. So Omari and Hampton comes all the way. They had taken Devon Achane at 210 and like JSN and several picks that I thought they were maybe more on our type of player, but Alvin Kamara over a sliding Omari and Hampton. We take Hampton there at 6'11". The drafter at the turn grabs Cameron Ward. So you see the difference in the QB that we would have gotten, and actually Hampton ends up being the running back that we get anyway at 6'7". But it was a smart call to take Stroud there at 5'02". We're back up. What are you liking here? The wide receivers I see in the queue. Yeah, I'm with all of them. McMillan?
We could take Geno Smith, but that doesn't get me that fired up. I mean, Tetmarella McMillan here is pretty fun.
He's super fun. The only other thing I'm thinking, I know you don't care about stacking, but Zay Flowers would be an option with Lamar. But I'm fine with McMillan. Sean just silently clicks McMillan as I bring up the stack.
I know that you're actually not that high. You're not as high as I am on Zay Flowers. And so even with that stack element, we probably will have some other options later. Then I continue to look at things where I think that McMillan has a chance to do something really special.
I think he's going to be good. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think he's more of a round 4 value, specifically in this tournament. To get him in round 7, that would have been hard to pass on. The other name who fell was Chuba, and we do like Chuba, but I guess I don't think it's maybe as big of an impact play.
Yeah, that one's tricky. He's an interesting option. He feels a little bit dead zone-y to me this year, coming off a great season. The ADP is probably just wrong. It's one of those things, though, that when a guy's kind of showing you what he is and the market still doesn't buy in, that tends to be a pretty good indication of sort of the dead zone-y type, historically, profile that has pretty poor hit rates, that the market is somewhat intelligent on that stuff. Probably a mix of concern about the offense, some of the other players on the roster. I don't know, but it seems pretty straightforward that Hubbard should be the guy. I mean, they brought in Trevor Etienne. Jonathan Brooks is out the whole year again. They brought in Rico Dowdle. I mean, if I was invested in a lot of Chuba Hubbard fantasy stock, I would be excited that they brought in Rico Dowdle, who's going to be active and play on special teams and those things, but probably not a huge threat to the Chuba Hubbard workload.
The Rico Dowdle profile was actually working on a Chase Brown piece earlier today. This idea of try not to chase your hits. But one of the reasons why I was looking at that is we did draft him when he fell to us in a main event. Chase Brown actually, and again, I mean, some of this is just the evidence is there, but there's also a wishful thinking component. But the vast majority of guys who are drafted late hit, they don't tend to hang on because the reason they were drafted late is they didn't have that great of a profile in the first place. Chase Brown's is actually very similar to like the Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler thing, where you have some reason to believe that will continue on. Rico Dalbo, who's a year 5 breakout in that same sort of vein, that profile basically, I mean, it's just not something that you really want to go after, which we're already seeing by the fact that the Cowboys let him go as a potential starter and he's a backup. So that's just, saying again, he's not going to hit again in year 2. Whether or not he's a true threat to Chuba, a little bit of a different story. Certainly with 2 guys there, because ETN's also interesting. That could be problematic. I think Chuba is a good play. He's probably also not a play that, that I or we will have a lot of.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think you're right, though. I do think cost adjusted, it makes kind of a lot of sense. Flowers had kind of slid a little bit. He does go at 805. Several other wide receivers off the board there. The queue right now, Shawn, you have an uninspiring group of quarterbacks. I think they're probably
just putting those guys in to make sure we don't lose track of them there.
I want to remember these guys. They are not in the player pool for the 8-9 turn, I don't believe. You have moved Mark Andrews to the top of the queue. I do think he's pretty darn interesting here at the end of the 8th with Lamar. I was going to suggest him. You got Pickens in there. I really like him. Addison, Jawan Jennings, Jerry Jeudy. Their ADP is maybe a little bit lower. Is that why you have them a little bit further down?
Yeah, I've got these guys in there more or less by ADP. Then I kept resisting the Mark Andrews pick in our main event, even when he fell some. I do think this is the right spot to take him.
Yeah, let's take him at 8-11 here. Laporta Andrews is a really nice, 4-11 and 8-11. You get him all the way at the end of the 4th, all the way at the end of the 8th. Kind of 2 players that they had elite profiles going into last year. Really, really good profiles. Didn't have the seasons that we wanted in 2024, and yet are both clearly very talented long-term. A lot of it was very situational, teammates being good, this, that, the other thing. You can have teammate injuries. You can have things that break their way for 2025 volume. You buy a little bit of a dip here. I love that. We are back up. Caleb Johnson, Tony Pollard at the turn. Receivers are all still there. Definitely would be in on Pickens. If you want to pull up another receiver, because we did take Pickens, spoiler alert, in that main that we're going to talk about here in a minute, we do grab Pickens there. So the draft so far through 9, Lamar Jackson, Brian Thomas, Drake London, Sam Laporta, CJ Stroud, Omarion Hampton, Tet McMillan, Mark Andrews, George Pickens. So we have Brian Thomas, London, McMillan, and Pickens. We have Lamar and Stroud. We have Laporta and Andrews. We are really good everywhere but running back. Surprise. Omarion Hampton is our only back, a rookie that we took when he was a huge value. It's a borderline 0 RB. It's a slightly off of 0 RB, but still pretty 0 RB feel to it. And I love 0 RB and Superflex. I always talk about this. People always ask me to write it more about Superflex at the newsletter. And I'm always just like, Superflex is my favorite format probably because you don't have to pay that much attention to the running backs. You still do, especially in the modern 2025 NFL. We've talked about this a lot this offseason. 2024, the meta definitely changed. Got to be willing to take running backs in 2025. But when you start to get the quarterbacks pushed up and they really matter, it gives you another really viable option in the early rounds. You still want to be deep at receiver. Tight end, still very viable in the early rounds. And you can replace production late at running back in a way that it's trickier at every other position, frankly. So it does make the 0 RB thing viable, not because the early running backs don't matter, but because the late running backs can hit in a way that can be really exciting. You get Bucky Irving and Chase Brown, this year's version of them, and you're cooking with oil when you've pushed that position a little bit. So, we don't have a full-on 0 RB here, but I do like when we get the depth everywhere else, these positions where it's harder to replicate it later because they're a little bit more talent-based in terms of where the production comes from than maybe slightly more situational at running back, although we often talk about the running back talent stuff as well. But yeah, fun start to this team. I'm super excited. Addison did go just a couple picks after us. Jawan Jennings went. The other receivers coming off a little bit here. This would be a good draft for your guy, Jaden Higgins, here in a little bit, because we got CJ Stroud, and I don't think we like any of the later Texans. We don't have to stack, but We're not going to probably be adding Dalton Schultz. I don't think you're as open to the possibility that Christian Kirk has much left as maybe I am, but I'm not like super in on him necessarily. But I think Jaden Higgins is a straightforward way to try to stack Stroud if there's an opportunity for that pick. Judy does go. Several other receivers that we like are coming off. You've got Jaden Reed at the top of the queue. I really like him. Olave is the guy by ADP. I'm certainly open to Olave as well. I know you don't have him in. Oh, you do have him in the queue now, but Sean's kind of working the queue. I'm just narrating here as he's kind of locked in. A lot of our guys going. We're a few picks away from being back up. It looks like a couple receiver options or some running back options. Certainly, Scattaboo has gone, but Bashal Tootin has not. We got him near the top of the queue. Okay, we made it back. I'm totally fine with Reed if that's the direction you prefer to go. But Olave by ADP, I'd love to get them both if you want to push running back more, but I also don't mind if you want to grab a running back here.
So go ahead and take Olave there. I'm not in on him, but I do see the potential and love to get it. I mean, these guys that one of the things that's great about drafting with someone that you enjoy drafting with and have a lot of respect for how they do draft is that when they have someone they want and it's at an ADP value, it becomes pretty straightforward. Reed is also here.
Let's get Reed. Yeah. So we go Olave Reed, and that gives us now 6 receivers. There were some fun running backs there, but again, just talking about the fact that in this format, you still want to get your receiver depth. It's best ball. I mean, man, I love getting Olave Reed there on the back of the Thomas London McMillan pick and start. This team is really, really fun. Yeah, you mentioned not really being in on Olave. Just I think I may have talked about him recently, but just a cliff notes for anyone who's curious why I'm in on him. It's just a lot of the per route stuff does look really promising. I'm worried about the concussions, and a lot of people are, but that's what's baked into his cost in a pretty big way. The quarterback stuff is concerning, and the different offense is concerning. But for the first 3 years of his career, he's been over 2 yards per out run, which is like the benchmark for like a really good season using PFF's numbers. In the first 2 years, full route rates. Last year, only 188 routes, but the point that I would make there is he was still over 2 yards per out run on those routes. He left multiple games early with concussions because he had the 2 concussions. So if you look at some of his per game numbers, they aren't good, but I believe he left. I think he's a guy, Sean, when we were talking about it, he left 1 game after 2 plays and 1 game after 8 plays. So he ends up playing I think only 8 games last year, but really it was 6 games. And then he played 10 total snaps in the other 2. And that is accurate. So you had a catch in both of those. So on those 10 snaps, he still had 2 receptions. But unfortunately, the 2 concussions, it is concerning. But this is a guy that, some of his per game numbers look worse last year. But again, I think there's context to that. And then for the most part has just been consistently really, really good on a per out basis. I think, again, the concussion stuff is pretty baked in. People are saying that he's going to retire and this, that, and the other thing, or they are sort of alluding to that, or that's why they want to be out on him, or they don't want to draft him, or it's so scary. The name I would point to is Brandon Cooks, where we felt the same way about him. I felt the same way about him in offseason after he had 2 scary concussions and had several over like a 3-year period. I felt like he might retire. One more hit, he might retire. He made it through the whole next season with that concussion, and then the year after that, he got a concussion, and I don't even think he missed a game. And that really surprised me in season. Is sort of the point of this story, is that the next time he got a concussion, maybe he missed 1 game, but I thought his next concussion might actually be a long-term thing. It didn't end up being that way. And I guess, again, the science on concussions is not something I'm super, I would take my word to the bank on or anything, but I do think people think they're scarier than, when Olave has a whole offseason to rest and heal his brain injury, which is what it is, the swelling of the brain and those things. It's more that the accumulation of concussions is scary long term, but maybe not scary in the immediate short term. If he does get a concussion next year, probably they'll take some caution with him, but it's not like he'll go to IR, I don't think, or something like that, which I think is the concern some people have. Anyway, we are all the way back up. It did just fire back to us pretty quickly. Talking about Chris Olave for just a second, I said.
Talking about those concussions, I do think this has to be Spears.
Okay. Yeah. We'll take Tyjae Spears. I mean, the other guy you have at the top of the queue is Josh Downs, and I was super in on that too. But maybe you're thinking Higgins is a plausible option as well.
We are pretty loaded at receiver at this point.
Right.
One of the elements of taking both Olave and Reed is it arguably closes us off to both the good Downs value and the good Higgins value. Not that we couldn't take one of the two of them. I was going to potentially pitch Daniel Jones to you here. This is about where we would need to take him.
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's a really good pick here.
It just seems
1302. Yeah, it seems like he's just, like you just said, it seems like he's the starter. Richardson already has a shoulder concern. There's skill concern there. We already were kind of betting on Daniel Jones being the guy. It just seems like Shane Steichen doesn't think he's going to be able to run his offense with Richardson. Not that Daniel Jones is incredibly good or anything, but the Superflex format, if Daniel Jones starts 13, 14 games and you have him at 1302, seems pretty straightforward there. Yeah, good point on the Olave Reed. Going back, so Higgins goes 2 picks later. Going back, I loved getting those two guys at the 10-11 turn. But if you take a Bashal Tootin there, or one of the running backs that we had, Jordan Mason in the queue, any of those guys, it does potentially drive us toward a receiver pick there. We could have went Downs, Jones, which would have stacked each other, or Higgins to stack with Stroud. Couple different ways we could have created some stack exposure in our build. But I do agree with you, bypassing like wide receivers on both those picks was probably necessary with how good our 6 receivers were. It was just our second running back, and it was our third QB in the 13th round. In Superflex, you definitely want to try to have at least some QB depth. So good calls.
And again, it's going to depend so much on who you're actually able to get. If you don't hit on the 3rd and 4th QBs, then it doesn't help you as much. But one of the things that the RCE does show is that you want to wait as much as you can on QB. I mean, ideally, you get one of those top guys in the first couple of picks. Wait as long as you can. Take the second player who potentially will be consistently scoring for you, as we did in Stroud, and then continue to wait, but to take 4. And at a certain point, if we don't get in there and get someone like Daniel Jones, then we're not going to want to take 4 because we're not even going to want to take 3. So it's a really nice fit structurally. And one of the reasons, certainly not panicked at all at running back. There are so many guys we like late.
Yeah.
And I think in this format too, there's even a little bit less pressure to say, like, definitively get, the early points. You can come back. You can win it through the rookies. You can win it through a lot of rookies. But I think that, and partly it's just I'm very high on Spears. My only concern with him, one of the things that kind of cool, when he scored more points in the fantasy playoffs last year than Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and Tony Pollard combined. Now, those guys only played 6 games and probably didn't play full games of those 6 games, and they were injured, right? But Spears scored a lot of points down the stretch. The big concern with him is that his season effectively also ended on a second concussion, and he's going to take more hits. So,
yeah, but I think I agree with you. I think he's a really nice pick for this build. In best ball, you do sometimes want to play a little bit of like a guaranteed role type thing. Like, he's one of 2 backs in that backfield that's going to play a lot. They've talked a lot this offseason about they want to get it as more of a split. Pollard wasn't very explosive last year because Spears was hurt a lot. So they went with more Pollard, but I don't think by design necessarily. I do think they wanted that to be a split. They talked a lot early in the season about it being a split, going back to a split. They never really did. So yeah, I was really excited to get him there as well. We are almost back up. You have 2 receivers at the top of the queue again that are good stack options, Jalen Noel and Rashad Bateman. But doesn't it feel like the time to start hammering some of these rookie running backs? Or does ADP say we can wait?
Probably can wait. I was going to make the case that we could get some more veteran back value first and take like either Dobbins or Davis, and then maybe take one of these receivers second.
Okay, let's take Dobbins. Yeah, I mean, he's going to sign somewhere. He's a guy that you've really liked the value on. Again, get some. He's going to have a role when he has a role and get some whatever. Guaranteed touches aren't really a thing, but in the 14th round, when it's your third running back, it's a nice thing to be trying to target. And then these, for anyone who's wondering what we're doing at running back or what our plan is, these rookies, the idea is not just that we're chasing something now. We think these rookies are really good and have the potential to be really, really good this year. But we're gonna go receiver here. I mean, I'd probably just we have Bateman over Noel in a vacuum, and we already have it stacked up. So I'd probably just go Bateman, right? Or do you want to go Noel?
Okay, I think Bateman. Yeah. Part of the thing with the Superflex here is just you take those Stroud points when you get them. They don't have to be stacked together with the strength of a receiver group. If Lamar hits in the way that allows us to be successful with this team, so much of it is going to be those long scores from Bateman. I certainly think he's better in best ball. I think it's very possible that he actually has a redraft breakout this season. We talked a little bit on one of the previous shows that's somewhat rare. The breakouts that you tend to get from the fifth-year players are the late picks who stick around. The first-round picks get so many chances that if they haven't done it by now, and most of them are already out of the league, right? If you haven't done it, you're done or you're a star. Bateman is interesting, though, in that he did have some injuries. He's played in this offense that has not been very passing favorable at times. They've made some of the adjustments now. He was so good down the stretch. The only thing kind of holding back my Zay Flowers enthusiasm, and I think for his enthusiasts, they did come out recently and say, we got to get in the ball more. They didn't do a great job of that in the last 5, 6, 7 games of last season, which, I mean, that's tough, right? I mean, if you're not going to throw it to Zay Flowers pretty heavily when you also are not a high volume passing team, it's a big problem. But some of that is just that Rashad Bateman was that good. And then if you end up with 2 tight ends that you like, you have Flowers, but you also have Bateman. They're looking to get other guys involved. I mean, to a certain extent, it's just there aren't enough targets to go around, but the targets for all of those guys, and especially for Bateman, are extremely high value.
Are we done at receiver now? In a 20-round super flex, we have 7 really good receivers. We only got the 3 running backs. Are we done at tight end with 2? What structurally? What I know you've done a lot more work than I have.
Structurally, we just need more picks. We've taken too many receivers.
We've taken too many receivers. We need 30 picks. We'll lobby for an extended draft. But yeah, the other running backs I was just going to mention, for people that are listening and tearing their hair out, maybe they're newer around here. Think about what Bucky Irving was last year, what Chase Brown was. It's not a hope strategy that we're going to get this year's version of that. The last year wasn't the only year that there's examples of those types of running backs that can hit from the late rounds. I think when you see a draft, you put these kinds of drafts on Twitter and people go, oh my God, these running backs are terrible, because they can't envision what these rookies could mean for a build. Even the ones that we're going to take, which at the top of our queue right now, we have Dylan Sampson and Jarquez Hunter, DJ Giddens, Devin Neal, Brashard Smith. These are not the top tier or even really the second tier of this class. They're sort of in that third tier of this year's rookie running backs, but they have interesting profiles, interesting landing spots. We've talked about them a lot this offseason, Shawn, but the idea is with the uncertainty comes some real potential ceiling, some potential for major hits in a way that would make this build and supercharge the entire build. So it's not, we're just doing what we need to at this point, or we're trying to slap a Band-Aid on a major leak in our boat here. It's it's an intentional thing that we are trying to target real upside with these rookie backs in a class that is incredibly talented. And I don't know, it sometimes bears repeating. Sometimes I need to remind myself, because even in our other main event, we're going to do it again. And it's sometimes it just gets, it's not monotonous, but it gets we're doing this in every single draft. Are we crazy? we're not crazy. That's the edge to be pressing in early June. Jarquez Hunter does go. DJ Giddens before that. Hunter would have been probably one of the two preferred there. Giddens kind of the backup. We ended up passing on Giddens in the slow as well. He would have been a fun one to add here with the Daniel Jones bet. Just kind of betting on the Colts offense generally, not like a stack thing, but kind of a fun little correlation. Samson does make it back. You have him at the top of the queue. I'm totally comfortable with that trigger. You're feeling good about him.
And Ben, we will end up getting Samson on a lot of teams the way that we've been doing this. But he's wildly undervalued. And I mean, he's going to play a lot. It's actually a little bit more of a Jerome Ford concern than a Quinshon Judkins concern. But there's a very real chance that even at his size, that he is just simply better than Judkins right away. And they drafted him high enough that if he is better right away, they can move to that. And this is a guy where it's not just a space back kind of play. Now, before we get deeper into that, Rashard Smith here with the next pick?
Definitely. I'm definitely into it unless you want to go to Shipley and try to push Smith. Does Smith come back? No, let's do.
He doesn't quite come back. And since we lost Giddens and Hunter in the previous round.
Yeah. That was the pick. Devin Neal also went in the turn. A lot of rookie running backs have been going off. So that was the right pick. Sorry, finish with Samson.
So Samson is an explosive guy. He plays faster. You look at some of the tracking data, plays faster than he times, and he doesn't time poorly. And then he's also an elite short yardage back as a small player. So one of the things that I think is very, very exploitable this season is the smaller backs. And you think to a Devon Achane and how he's actually smaller than most of the guys, and significantly smaller in some cases than the guys who are being discounted as small backs. And in many cases, it's not just that, but that these guys actually have superior profiles as well. That doesn't mean you're going to be Achane, who has hit a very high outcome in his range, very, very good player. But drafting small running backs, Ben, it's one of the most exploitable things you can possibly do in fantasy. And obviously, Rashard Smith, a smaller guy as well.
Yeah, and it's great in best ball because these are guys that make explosive plays and then hit your lineup. You don't have to. I mean, some of the concern maybe with smaller backs would be some workload concern. Do teams actually give, even though a lot of them have shown they can hold up, do teams believe that? Will they give them enough touches? Is that and the other thing? But you get them in best ball, you just need them to get into that game where the starter rolled his ankle and just misses the rest of the game, or they get a little extra work, or on limited touches they have some big plays. But that's what we have with Tyjae Spears as well. Hampton probably expected to get more work. Dobbins hopefully lands somewhere where he gets more work. But that's our backfield: Amarian Hampton, Tyjae Spears, J.K. Dobbins, Dylan Sampson, Rashard Smith. And I mean, I don't hate it because when you consider how good we are at the other positions, that's only 5 backs. We have 7 receivers. We have 3 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends, 3 picks left. What are you thinking structurally here?
We still don't need that receiver. At some point, Noel does become interesting, and you just don't worry as much about. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. I think that Fannin is a very straightforward pick. You want to get to the 3rd tight end, and he, for me, is just like a draft in every single draft guy. I do think that Joe Flacco is pretty interesting here as the person who does look like a pretty meaningful favorite to play at least the first half of the season as the starter for the Browns.
Yeah, I think he's going to play a lot as well. I was surprised in one of our dynasty leagues, Sean. He went undrafted in a Superflex, like 30-man deep league. Spoiler alert to you and everyone else in the league. I'm going to be trying to pick him up off waivers whenever that runs. Let's go Fannin, and if we can get Flacco on the way back as our 4th QB, it's a little stack option. It goes with Dylan Sampson. We're doing a nice little – got a stew going. A little late-round Cleveland Browns stew going.
There you go. I think the Browns are going to be – they would be my surprise offense if I had to pick one at this point, and in part because not only is Joe Flacco somebody who can move the ball, but both Sanders and Dylan Gabriel are pretty interesting. Flacco right here?
Yep.
I think that the guy who wins the battle of the rookies is going to be a very viable player for them in the final third of the season, what have you, whenever they decide to make that move.
You're talking between Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. You had been saying that one of them was going to start, so this is the first time I've heard you mention the Flacco thing. That was kind of my read on it earlier. You're usually way more plugged into the news this time of year. Have you been hearing some stuff that's making you think that that's what it sounds like out of Cleveland?
It is what it sounds like. I don't know that we can necessarily take any of those things that seriously. Certainly, you have a team like the Giants who takes Jackson Dart, and then they're like, ideally, we would rest him all season. Like, no, ideally, he's so good that you got to go to him. The Browns' approach of taking Gabriel, who you have to assume they had a very good rating on, and for good reason, right? He's basically Tua in terms of a prospect, and you get him without having to spend what the Dolphins had to spend and almost lock themselves into giving Tua all those chances, which obviously he did eventually come through once he got the elite coordinator. You kind of think that you have at least some of that with the Browns, but then all of the other things with Sanders, and the fantasy community has been very clear that they think that Sanders is still going to be the guy. You have two shots at it. For the Browns, like, we don't really want to wait into 2026 to find out what we have. You could even argue for them that their best case scenario is they actually have excuses to play both of those guys at some point this year. Just get a feel. Like, do we need to go back to the well next season? Because of where they made those picks, they can. So I think we're likely to see a little something one way or the other there. But at the same time, they actually project to be good, right? That offense, I mean, Cedric Tillman is an interesting deep guy. They've got now Fannin behind Njoku, who's still one of the best tight ends. I mean, Jerry Jeudy is massively overrated. This is a team that could score a ton of points.
I think you meant underrated. You said massively overrated for Jeudy.
Jeudy is the guy.
I'm sure you meant underrated. I've heard you talk about Jerry Jeudy before. Trevor Etienne goes off there. He's one of the rookies that we really like that you can get in the 20th round. He does go in the 20th, though. You have Keaton Mitchell at the top of the queue. I haven't given him a lot of thought. I was taking him some last year because I figured after he came back from the ACL that he would play. He was good as a rookie the year prior. Never really got healthy enough to get on the field last year. 2 years removed. An interesting name. You just added Ollie Gordon. I was going to ask you about him. I also really like Sean Tucker, who we have in the queue. We do got to go running back here, but Tucker, to me, showed he was good last year. Got two guys in front of him that if an injury occurs or if he just beats out Rachaad White over time, I kind of like that. Like, either guy would probably get him on the field, getting banged up. But any of these three is fine by me. You pick your favorite and then explain.
Well, let's go ahead and lean into the Baltimore element.
There it is. I wasn't thinking of that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
I think we get all those guys together. I would have loved to have taken Trevor Etienne, but I do think that Mitchell and Tucker should be getting drafted in these drafts. I think one of the things that people look at Justice Hill and how good he was last year, people who've been listening to the show since the very beginning probably know that I've been waiting forever for Justice Hill to be awesome. And it probably doesn't sound right for him to finally hit. And he was quite good last year. He's a plus receiving back. He also has some real athleticism. And Keaton Mitchell is just unreal, right? You think about what Derrick Henry was doing in this offense last year. It's easy to forget that Keaton Mitchell was doing all of that and more when he got to touch the ball a couple years ago as a rookie. Keaton Mitchell is one of the very small handful of guys who, I believe, 24 plus miles per hour on his combine top speed. That's beating all of the players from this year. He's someone who had elite evasion rates even as a small back in college. And then he had elite evasion rates as a rookie with the Baltimore Ravens. The touches that he gets, I mean, he's basically that Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, H-hand back where every single touch is a high-value touch. And especially when you're playing for the Ravens where the defense has so much to account for, you've got to account for Lamar Jackson to start it all, and then you've got to account for all of these receiving weapons. You certainly would imagine that the defense takes a little bit of a breather and a sigh of relief when Derrick Henry is not out there. And then when you do, Keaton Mitchell is just going to be gone. I think Keaton Mitchell is a top 20 back in the NFL. I don't think Justice Hill can block him when he's that good.
And for anyone curious, Hill did go in the 16th round, so it's not like we had that choice. But obviously, very important player to Mitchell's bull cases. But yeah, I didn't make the Mitchell connection to our big Ravens bet. This was a Lamar Jackson team. The final team: Lamar Jackson, Brian Thomas, Drake London, Sam Laporta, C.J. Stroud, Omarion Hampton, Ted McMillan, Mark Andrews, George Pickens, Chris Olave, Jaden Reed, Tyjae Spears, Daniel Jones, J.K. Dobbins, Rashad Bateman, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, Harold Fannin, Joe Flacco, and Keaton Mitchell. So we had 4 QBs: Lamar Jackson, Stroud, Daniel Jones, and then Flacco really late in the Superflex best ball. Love getting the 4th. I mean, I think that's an awesome situation. I've always enjoyed that in the Superflex best ball, specifically that format, because we know that QB scoring can kind of fluctuate week to week. Like Stroud, for example, as a pocket passer, doesn't run a lot, can have some games that are really low. We probably will get Lamar's number into our lineup most weeks, but if Stroud has a low number, we have both Daniel Jones and Flacco, who neither of them may even play all the games. That's why we took them much later. Running backs were Hampton, Spears, Dobbins, Sampson, Brashard Smith, Keaton Mitchell. Certainly the weakness of the team, but still a lot of potential to gain back some points that we know we're giving up a little bit there, because we're not trying to win the title with the running backs here. We're trying to survive, essentially. The wide receivers: Brian Thomas, Drake London, Ted McMillan, Pickens, Olave, Jaden Reed, and then Rashad Bateman stacked. It's a really, really good 7-man receiver core. And then the tight ends, we get Laporta and Andrews at great values. And then, as you mentioned, really like Harold Fannin coming back in the 18th round as a 3rd tight end. And the roster construction stuff that you've done the work on has shown that you want to get that 3rd tight end in this format. It is tight end premium. Fannin, a guy who put up just absurd numbers last year for a tight end at the college level. Yes, it was Bowling Green. Yes, et cetera, et cetera. He runs duck-footed, whatever. He also was really good against Penn State and Texas A&M when he got to play better competition, and was just so good that you have to consider that he may just be a little bit of a unicorn in some respects. Fun dude to add that late, stacked up with Flacco there. I love this team, Sean. Is there anything that is glaring to you as a concern?
No. I think that we probably, you could have added a running back in that Jaden Reed pick and not even replaced it with some other receiver and just maybe feel a little bit stronger about it. I'm probably wrong about this, but I do think that J.K. Dobbins is more of a 10-round value than a 14th round value. If you put him in that round as a veteran to balance out the youth, then you're suddenly like, the build is fine. The build is exactly how you would want it. We're trying to get some of these guys early that we think will make big moves in ADP. Ben, I've mentioned this a couple of places, but the SIS numbers suggest that J.K. Dobbins was like the 3rd best back in the NFL against heavy boxes last year. And it seems like he's probably going to be healthier this year, right? I don't even think it matters where he signs. He's good enough that he will be in a committee basically anywhere. I did want to kind of follow up that Keaton Mitchell note and just say that I did double check. It's kind of crazy. He and Isaac Guerrero are tied for the 2nd fastest max speed during the 40 in the last 3 years. The only person faster is H.A.N., and he has the very fastest 10-yard split, 100th of a second faster than Tootin, who is also gapped from the next guy. When you're both the fastest overall and the fastest in the first 10 yards, again, good luck stopping Keaton Mitchell when he gets carries. If he gets carries, Ben, then again, he eliminates some of these other problems that we potentially have. Partly the thing with running back is that once Omarion Hampton fell by like almost 2 rounds, I think that's what I'm looking at here. He has an ADP. He's got an ADP toward the end of 5. So a 1-round value there. I'm not even as high on Hampton as many people. I was telling you that I kind of got lost in some of the other YouTube content out there. I was watching, I believe, an Underdog show where they had Maurice Jones-Drew on, and he ranked Hampton 7th at the running back position. And he was saying that he was going to get, a lot of grief for it. But Hampton's big problem was that when he has to stop his feet, it's an issue because he's really slow at getting them stopped and he's really slow at getting them started again. And I was like, you know who that reminds me of is Derrick Henry, who has had a pretty good career. So once you get started again, you were in deep trouble when Hampton has the ball. Yeah, I'm pretty fired up about this team.
And I know you weren't poking any fun at MJD there because you shared that with me and you were saying this. I really like this list. You thought it was a really interesting list that.
Yeah, you had Henderson too. You had Giddens high. I love.
Yeah, he had Giddens up there. You thought it was a really fun list. Yeah, this is a great team. Feel good about it. We only had 30-second clock, Shawn, so we didn't get a chance to discuss the main event team while we were talking through it, but I kept referencing it and saying that we were going to talk about it. So let's jump over to that real quick and discuss a little bit. We started off in the main from the 110. This is our slow draft. And while we did our fast draft last week in the last episode, we talked about the first 4 picks. We went Trey McBride, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, and Josh Allen. At the 5-6 turn, we were always planning to go receiver there, which is a big part of why we were willing to go with no receivers in the first 4, because it's a pocket of receivers we really, really like. We talked about several options, including potentially pulling up Jordan Addison, who you really like. He almost made it all the way back to us at 7-10. He went 7-07. A little bit of a bummer. He didn't slide 3 more picks and get back to us. We went with my guy, George Pickens. You're not quite as high on him. Over Zay Flowers, over DK Metcalf, who was a bit of a slider. We took Pickens at 5-10. We took your guy, Jerry Jeudy, at 6-03. Then we took Jaden Reed at 7-10 after Addison went. And then Bashal Tootin at 8-03. That's when we discussed quite a bit. We pulled Tootin up to 8-03. We weren't entirely sure. Went back and forth on several potential options. Thought about taking Mark Andrews there, as you alluded to, while we took him in the best ball pick in the 8th round. Felt like a decent value. We just got him at 8-11 in best ball. Both of these, again, are tight end premium. So you start to get Andrews well into the 8th round in a tight end premium format. It's pretty interesting. You also had mentioned to me the idea of potentially bringing up like a Josh Downs into that pick. He almost made it all the way back. He goes 9-07. So some of these picks that we were considering taking maybe a full round ahead of ADP started to slide a little bit on the way back, but we were all the way at the turn. We didn't get to realize those values. The drafter in the 7 hole got both of those players. At 9-10, we ended up going Brandon Ayuk, and at 10-03, Luther Burden, who you really liked as sort of the last receiver in the wide receiver window. I was making a little bit of a pitch for Jaden Blue, but once you made that point, I did really like structurally us going that direction. So 5 of our 6 picks there, Shawn, after the 4 start of McBride, Achane, Chase Brown, and Josh Allen were wide receivers and got us kind of back on track. Pickens, Jeudy, Jaden Reed, Ayuk, and Burden. And then our surprise was that Jaden Blue actually made it all the way back. He is one that did slide all the way back around. We got him at 11-10 anyway. So we still have Bashal Tootin and Jaden Blue behind the Achane Chase Brown start. The final 3 picks that we've made up into the 15th round where we're at now, we got Dallas Goedert, really nice value at 12-03. So he ended up being our tight end 2. Then we took Dylan Sampson, who we just talked about. And then Brashard Smith went a little bit early on the turn there. And on the way back at 14-03, we didn't really know what we were going to do there. The plan was to go Sampson, Brashard Smith, like we just did in this best ball draft. I was unreachable, Shawn. I was at my daughter's softball team party, but I had made some comments to you about potentially considering Hollywood Brown. I believe the turn prior at 12:03, or no, I guess maybe at 13:10, just as a little bit of a hedge on a lot of the other KC receivers we're going to play. And you had seen something, I think you mentioned that was at least somewhat intriguing. So I think you took Hollywood Brown as a kind of an olive branch to me, because I was trying to sell you on Hollywood Brown a little bit. Unfortunately, I was unreachable, as I said, because I probably wouldn't have cared if we just went with your guy, DJ Giddens. He ends up going. He didn't make it back to us either. We're hoping in the 15th to still add some running back, because this is managed. Hollywood Brown. I do kind of like Hollywood Brown and managed, because you get the take a peek element on FFPC for people who know that FFPC quirk, because he plays one of the early games before the opening Sunday in week 1. If he happens to score 2 touchdowns or something, we can put him in our lineup after we know his score. And we also will just get a good look at his routes and his usage early. We may wind up cutting him Sunday morning before week 1, which we can also do. but we get an option to look at again in the 14th round. We're not tied to him at all. So I thought that was kind of interesting that we could get a little bit of a look at him. Traditionally, you're kind of doing that with rookies to see if they have a decent week one role as a take a peek. But I thought it was a possibility for Hollywood Brown here at this price. And so we did add him to a team that, is at least a little bit weaker at receiver. And if Hollywood Brown, for some reason, does play a lot, he's only 28. You've pointed out to me multiple times he hasn't actually had a very good season for like 5 years. It's been a long time, but I'm hoping that maybe there's something still there with this pick. But this team is coming together pretty nicely.
It is. It's one of these elements where, especially early in the offseason or early in the draft season, I think that those ADP values don't mean very much because things could change very substantially. And yet at the same time, you don't hate them, right? This team has gotten very fortunate on some of the prices. Chase Brown is a mid round 3. And when you're talking about that early in the draft, for him to fall to the 310 was pretty exciting. I think especially because we didn't necessarily have a lot of picks that we felt like were must-haves. We like Hampton, we like Walker, we like Harvey. Certainly we're fine with Cook. We like Henderson. Those guys all go in 4, but we're going to have plenty of chances probably at those players. We go ahead with Brown, and then you get Josh Allen behind the other 2 elite QBs. That's where I have him ranked. So it's not a great rankings value, but if you're going to get a share of him, you would want it to be in this instance. We get the very nice value on Brandon Ayuk, who could become one of the trendy risers that people feel comfortable. It seems weird to say they feel comfortable he's just going to miss 4 games and then be 100%. But frankly, when you're talking about Brandon Ayuk, and even as someone who's like a very mild Brandon Ayuk skeptic, when you're talking about getting him from weeks 5 through the end, winning the whole thing, you're going to take him at 9-10. Again, you love to have that value there. You mentioned the value on Blue. I'm also not that into Dallas Goedert, but Goddard has some things that are very positive for him, including plus efficiency there with the Eagles. And Colin and I just did this really great show with Eric Beinfort where he was going through what would happen if you have a Saquon Barkley injury. The pass game blows up, right? And Goddard doesn't need that to be a value there. He certainly doesn't need it to be a value in tight end premium. There are scenarios where he beats that price, not just by the ADP value we got, but by 5 rounds. So you love to have that. It is kind of amusing once we get down to Hollywood where I'm completely out on Hollywood Brown. And yet I was working through this. Patrick Mahomes gives a great interview where he's explaining that when a guy comes off of injury late in the season, it's just so hard to really get them heavily involved. One of my problems with Brown is just he hasn't been good for a while. He gets injured almost every season. Blair's research suggests that it seems like this thing, well, if a guy is a collapse player, but it was because they were hurt, and that's better than if they just played poorly. The research doesn't really indicate that. It indicates that a guy getting hurt, especially, 28 is actually not young for an NFL player, even though the receivers, the really good receivers, 28, 29, 30, you love them at that range. But Brown is not necessarily that. And at the same time, they didn't have the guys they're going to have this year in the playoffs last season, and he was invisible.
I love that.
Patrick Mahomes has more insight into it than I do, and he's just like, straightforwardly, we can't get him involved the way we would have liked when he's coming back at that point. He's going to be very good. This is way below ADP for him. You like him. If we're going to take him, this is where you got to take him. And so, I would have loved DJ Giddens, but again, tactically, it's a nice selection.
I think you've pretty much just sold me on this being our only share of him, because I think it was really interesting of everything you just said there, that note that, and from Blair's research, that if a player collapses due to injury, it almost doesn't matter, right? it's still hard to see those guys come back at 28 and then suddenly be healthy for a whole season when they just have been injured constantly. Some dudes just can't really hold up to the NFL game, and that may be the case. I was saying to you that I do think we'll probably wind up cutting him reasonably early, which is kind of a bummer. We probably should have just taken a Giddens, but maybe we get a big week one out of Brown, right? Maybe we get the Sammy Watkins game. We get to put it in our lineup, and then we cut him 2 weeks later. That's all I'm going to say. The take a peek part of it is the part that I'm going to fall back on and say, Shawn, we don't have the deepest wide receivers here. We started with 4 non-wide receivers. If he goes out there in the first game and scores a bunch of points, and then we get to put him in our lineup with the knowledge that he had 24 points because he scored 2 touchdowns on 6 catches or something, then that pick will be worth it just for that 1 week, I think, to get us off to a hot start.
Yeah, and it's not just the receivers, right? We're building these teams to try and win the $1 million. That's one of the reasons why we take Josh Allen, even though, I mean, it looks like Jared Goff may be available to us in round, 15.
15.
Right. So it seems a little absurd. We want to win the whole thing, and part of winning the whole thing is taking that Tootin pick. The flip side of that is you may not really want to play him in week 1. And not only do you have to fill both of the running back spots and both of the receiver spots, you've got to fill the 2 flex spots. Ayuk will be out. He won't be a possibility. Burden, we may have 0 visibility to whether or not he's going to get routes in week 1. Dallas Goedert has this same element where we'll get to see him play. I guess I have more enthusiasm for just like the odds that he will hit on that big game in week 1, but it would be great for us if one of those 2 guys hits and can just fill that flex spot in the first week. Then we can take a good look at the roster, see who we think is going to score. I mean, ideally, I just would feel very comfortable with Pickens, Judy, and Reed by the time the week 1 kickoff rolls around. I'm like, I want those 3 guys in the lineup. But how many points do you think we would need from one of those 2 players to play? And again, it's not really even the receiver spot that we're looking at. It's more that second flex where,
even if we have Pickens, Judy, and Reed, to your point, if we don't really feel great about Tootin or Burden or Jaden Blue, Ayuk's going to be out. We still have to play another player. Right? We only have Achane and Chase Brown, so we still have 1 more flex. So how many points will we need? I mean, this to me looks like a team where if we got like 16 plus, I'm comfortable just taking either Goddard or Brown as that second flex right now, as I sit here right now. I don't know, but
I mean, Tootin could be the clear starter. Blue could be the clear starter.
Right.
And then it gets even trickier. 16 points would be hard to bench one way or the other.
Yeah. I think at that point with this team, we may have to look at like a Tootin or a Blue as just, we'll just confirm in week 1 that they have the role that it sounds like they might have, and then be ready to play him in week 2, but we'll take the points in week 1 kind of a thing. Goddard, I just wanted to note, he's a fascinating one. He gets hurt every year as well. He hasn't played more than 15 games since his rookie season. He's only played 15 twice since then in 6 years. Last year only played 10. He's missed at least like 4 games in 3 of the last 5 years as he did last year. It's been bad at times. Having said that, he's another one of those yards per route run guys that I think is pretty interesting. Only ran 225 routes last year, but a 2.20 yards per route, which is really good for tight end. He had a tough 2023 with a lot of routes, a career high routes, only 1.35 yards per route, but he was 1.82 back in 2022, and he was 2.34 as career high in 2021. So his 2.2 last year wasn't even a career high. He's been over 2.2 twice in the last 4 years as a tight end, which is and on a low ADOT. A lot of that is ball in hand stuff after the catch, high catch rate because he has the low ADOT, but they design stuff and they get him the ball. He makes those plays. The 1.82 in 2022 is also really interesting to me, and from the perspective that 3 of the last 4 years, he's been really, really good on a per route basis. And again, this is managed. It's one of those things where we're taking him as our second tight end behind Trey McBride, probably going to roster him. Like, he's a guy that may stick on our roster, may feel like a roster clogger at times. But if he gets hurt, especially if it's serious and we can just, cut him, then you're thinking, okay, him plus whatever replacement we get off waivers. It's one of those things. It's not great to be thinking about we'd have to replace him off waivers. But whenever he's healthy, I do feel like he's going to project better in a tight end premium format than this tight end 18 price tag. That week, he's going to be the tight end 8 in the projections, or tight end 10 or something like that. So it's not, these are not our traditional picks. We're often just hammering these rookies in there. It's interesting because we took Goddard in 12, we took Hollywood Brown in 14, and the picks around them in 10, 11, and 13 were all rookies: Luther Burden, Jaden Blue, and Dylan Sampson. And yet we're sitting here talking about the two veterans like, this was a crisis of faith here with these two picks. Most people are like, those are very normal picks, just move on. But we took two veterans in here, mixed them in. And you mentioned the Ayuk pick. He's another one I want to discuss. At 9:10, I said at 10:03, you felt like Burden was the last guy of the wide receiver window. Right after him at 10:04, Kyle Williams goes. The only other receiver in 10 was Keon Coleman. And then the first 11 picks of 11 were non-receiver until 11-12, the last pick of the 11th. So after that Burden pick, you get Kyle Williams, another rookie. You get Keon Coleman, a year 2 guy. You get a full round of non-wide receiver picks. And then Trey Harris, Darnell Mooney, Cedric Tillman. My point is, the room basically told us, yes, that was the end of the wide receiver window, which I bring up because Burden was the 10:03. The only other receiver who went on the turn was Emeka Ibuka. He went 10:1. Ayuk was right before that at 9:10. He went after Cooper Kupp, Diggs, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Khalil Shakir, Jaden Higgins, Matthew Golden in the 8th round, Debo at the early part of the 8th round. Jacoby Myers is in the 7th in this league. There's a bunch of names there that Brandon Ayuk is a more talented wide receiver than last year. I had a hard time with him in the middle of the second for a lot of structural reasons. People were all in on that because he had a 3+ yards per route run the year prior. There were so many elements. And again, yards per route run is not the only important stat. I always typically use it as a foundational or benchmark stat, targets per route run as well, how you can break it up into the component parts. It's just an easy thing for me to reference. But Ayuk had an incredible season in 2023 and then comes back in 2024, is not as good on a per route basis, and then also gets injured. So I understand why, and then he's going to probably miss part of 2025. So I understand why people are not taking him as high. Having said that, wide receiver 50, and like right before the wide receiver window closes, we get a chance to take him before Buka and Burden and like Kyle Williams, and then everyone's pretty much done taking receivers for several rounds. I just thought that was a fascinating valuation. I loved that value for us as a rebound guy. Debo's not there anymore. Jawan Jennings broke out. There was so much target availability last year, but Ricky Pearsall didn't, even with all the availability. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, there are guys there, but when this team is at full strength, when Ayuk is back, he's going to be a guy in this offense, one would assume. Certainly when you get the opportunity for a play like that at a cost like 9-10 in a main event where you didn't take a receiver in the first 4 rounds, and this guy was going in the middle of the second last year, has the potential to be our top scoring wide receiver for the down the stretch. He could be our wide receiver 1. Hopefully we have other guys that are smashing, but I just I loved that one, that addition to our build. Really like that addition. Really like the Goddard addition, Sean. You've convinced me the Hollywood Brown edition was maybe one that I should have kept my thoughts to myself on.
The Ayuk one is just really tricky, I think, because healthy, like you're saying, he goes much earlier. I think the risk is that you miss more games than you're expecting, and then the first month back, the player is not the same guy, if not even longer. And then you have this weekly question of, like, can we play him yet? And so then you get into like week 10 and you've gotten almost no value, and you're really relying on the rest of your roster to A, hit, and B, stay healthy. One of the things for me is that I am optimistic enough about Pickens and Judy and Reed that if things break correctly on this team, which that could mean Dallas Goedert, it could mean a guy we haven't selected yet. Really, it probably only takes one of Tootin, Blue, and Sampson to do what we're hoping from them to have the things work. Because really, you're going to want to watch Ayuk for several weeks after he's back to really confirm for yourself that he is actually startable on an elite team. And so then you're starting to look at a time frame that is even much more extended. So that's where I think, we could potentially have some problems. And so we have to then balance this idea of how do we win the whole thing versus how do we make sure most of our teams are crafted in such a way that we're more likely to get there than other ways of going about it. One of the things that we really liked last year is that even though we didn't have a team pushing to win, like we were very fortunate to have the previous season, we had a lot of teams in the mix. And that's really all you can ask, right? Is if you're going to play 5 teams, you really optimize your chances of getting as many through. If you're going to play 10, same thing. If you're going to play 50, then maybe you can start to play with things a little more. But again, however many teams you play, you want to get as many of them into the tournament as possible, because really so much of it at that point is more or less out of your control. I do want to ask you about Josh Allen. I mean, we know going in that the second level of QBs is going to be very inexpensive. That's simply the way redraft works. So it's not a shock to see names. I mean, frankly, and we're probably not going to go that route, but we've even talked about taking a kicker or defense this round. There's some tactical reasons why you might do that, even though it seems a little bit silly. But when you're talking about taking a kicker or defense, when guys like CJ Stroud and Jared Goff might be available, and you think about the players who do go later in round 4, names we like McMillan, Walker, Harvey, Henderson, Xavier Worthy. I mean, I have an early 3rd round grade on Xavier Worthy. Any second guessing of that Josh Allen pick, or is it just all baked in where we know that you're going to have a little bit of that regret because this is exactly how we expected the draft to play out?
It's a good question. When we talked about taking that pick, a big part of it was the way that these guys can score, the unique elements of the sprint format, and how the high-end dual threat quarterbacks, at least anecdotally to me, I don't have the historical leaderboards anywhere saved, but I like to look through when we got teams in the sprint every year, and we're kind of keeping an eye on what's doing well and what's not. And those guys, those dual threat, elite scoring potential quarterbacks have been near the top. The builds with those teams have been near the top the last several years, the last half decade or so. And I've hypothesized it's because they have the highest weekly ceilings. They also have really good floors. And so if they hit, whichever one of them hits one of the big games across those 3 weeks, is going to pair it with 2 pretty good games. And that's going to put them in a realm where like Jared Goff and CJ Stroud probably can't get. And that doesn't mean that's the only thing that's a part of it.
I don't know if you're following these Detroit practice reports where Dan Campbell wants you to know that Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta and Jamison Williams have been very good.
So maybe Jared Goff can throw 15 touchdowns in a 3-week span because he has 2 6 TD games or something. No, I mean, it's a cost related point as well, because you're talking about Josh Allen versus Jared Goff, plus, like you said, Kenneth Walker, plus Tet McMillan, plus Xavier Worthy, and what that does for the rest of your build and all those things. And at the time when we took Allen, I was saying, felt like we'd get enough other value and things that we liked that we would have a deep team that we really liked. And so it'd be nice to have kind of use the early draft capital on this trump card that we can't get later. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, I mean, it would be nice to have Kenneth Walker on this build too, and just have a 3rd elite running back in the early round. We'd have so much more firepower just adding him to this build, or one of these other receivers, and feeling even more incredible about our receiver room that did come together nicely. But man, now we also have Xavier Worthy on it. And then we didn't take Hollywood Brown probably on that scenario because we already took Xavier Worthy. There's a lot of, as far as the second guessing goes, structurally I look at it and I totally understand the idea that we could have waited and we could have had some real potential at the quarterback position. I do keep going back to not that these quarterbacks are going to be guys you have to have, but there is, I think, something with these profiles that is a little bit unique. It does make them worth those picks to me. So it's a unique question. I don't think it's as straightforward as it used to be 5 years ago, right? Where it was pretty obvious that the 4th round pick, the 2v2 that you could trade off, you'd probably wanted the non-QB, and then you could take the Jared Goff or the CJ Stroud type later. I think it's a little less obvious to me now, and especially in a year where you're talking about pocket passers, Stroud and Goff. There's not the great late round dual threat mobility options. Like Jaden Daniels last year was another fun one that we got for the first time since maybe like Lamar was a year 2 guy. We got that amazing pricing on him. I guess we had a year where Hurts was a pretty affordable. Unfortunately, we were taking a lot of Trey Lance that year, I remember, but we did take some Hurts. But we don't have a great rookie class right now or young dual threat quarterbacks that make a ton of sense in that mold. Maybe Bo Nix in the 10th is still that. Maybe Drake May in the 12th is that. Maybe Justin Fields in the 10th, even though he's not even close to a rookie, can be that. They can score at a really high rate in a way that makes the trade-off make sense. But yeah, the rookie class isn't. Cam Ward's going to start, but the rest of it is at least somewhat questionable as far as how good these guys are going to be and how they're going to score for fantasy. And Ward himself, how is he going to score for fantasy? It's more of a pass first guy. So I do think it's an interesting season where I'm trying to keep an open mind to the early QB stuff. I do think it's very possible that what you're suggesting, we could look back on this and regret it, is true. I also think we could look back on it and be like, we had to take an early quarterback. Like, we get to week 17 in the sprint, and the top 15 teams are all Josh Allen teams. And we're like, all right, well, yeah, I mean, good thing we have Josh Allen, And
all I could think about while you were saying most of that was Allen Iverson's rant and wanting somebody who knows how to do things to replace practice with pocket passers every time as he goes through it.
Talk about pocket passers?
I also wanted to ask you how much of this is recent memory in that you talked about how teams have needed to have that star QB. Last year on our best team, one of the reasons it was good is that it stayed healthy, right? But we also continue to accumulate QB options and upside options, the types of profiles that should work.
How did that go for us?
And when we were over these weeks and we had Caleb Williams, interesting profile there, a little bit of rushing possibly. We had Drake May, interesting profile there, a little bit of rushing possibly if the Patriots coaches hadn't been trying to get themselves fired by keeping him healthy for his second year. Anthony Richardson, the supposed unicorn from that perspective. And Tua, the fallback, this guy is a good passer option.
We also had CJ Stroud on this team. So I don't think this was a Caleb team because remember we still had Stroud on that one as well.
That's true. It was Stroud. Stroud is the one where we had to play him. Never play again. Yeah. I think forever. And then we traded for him in Dynasty. But we had some similar teams that had those guys. When you go through a 4-week stretch and you pick the low score every time, does that influence? Like if we had picked the high score all across, we'd be like, oh, you got to go late round QB. Just stream it. Yeah,
Shawn, you figured it out. Yes, I just want to play Josh Allen every week and not think about it. Yes, our 4 quarterback strategy has scarred me. Listeners late last year will remember that every week we picked the lowest score of the 4 from like the championship of our league in week 14 through week 15, 16, 17, the sprint. Somehow of a 4 quarterback structure where we had accumulated all these options. We'll make teams like that. We'll definitely make teams like that where we have to play late round QB upside. And I do think that was a really fun way to do it, to give ourselves a lot of options and then to try to Frankenstein it, as I like to say, over when I talk about the Frankenstein running back stuff over at the newsletter, but try to do, hey, if we can thread the needle and pick the top score of the 4 each of the 3 key weeks of the sprint, and we hit 3 straight 30-point games, we can match Josh Allen through a build that didn't take any early quarterbacks and just accumulated waiver options. Because that's the thing; those guys do become available. That's the crux of your point there. Anthony Richardson got cut in that league, and we added him. We added, I think, Tua. I think we had Stroud. He was actually one that we took reasonably high. And then we added whoever of the others, Drake May, probably. I think that one wasn't a Caleb team. We had Caleb on like 2 other teams, but where we had some tough decisions frequently. But he had a little bit more of an ADP. He wasn't cut. The other guys, I think, were like basically all added throughout the year in addition to the Stroud thing. And then we had 4 options, and we're like, okay, they're different ceiling options, guys that we could potentially plug in and play.
Somebody's going to get hot.
Yeah, it was either someone's going to get hot, or you just navigate it really well in the sprint, and you hit on 3 really smart start sits, which we've shown we're only every decision away from getting right. So once we get that part of it down, I do think it's a viable way to lead, because what you're trying to do to win, the $1 million is ratchet up variance a little bit and try to hit on some things. And that's, quarterback is still a position where you could, I think, point taken. You could make that type of a move. I don't think what we were doing was crazy. Ratchet up the variance. If you do hit all of the options correct, you could potentially match the Josh Allen team. And probably part of the reason that all of the teams I'm seeing near the top are the Josh Allen teams is because it's easier when the one quarterback scores all the points than what I'm suggesting. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's a little bit like when, the 0 RB teams weren't at the top. It's like, well, yeah, only like 10 people are drafting 0 RB, and it's all Shawn Siegele's teams. But there's not enough options to compete with the number of Josh Allen teams that are there. There's not enough other people that are trying a strategy where they're trying to navigate 3 different quarterback starts out of 4 that they're carrying and trying to Frankenstein 90 quarterback points over a 3-week span. And even if there are others that are trying it, they're not going to be doing the same quarterbacks, right? So it's already going to be a lightly replicated thing if you do get it right, but that's part of the joy of it. If you do get it right, then you've differentiated. You're not competing with all of the other Josh Allen teams. You could potentially run away with quarterback points in one of these formats that's a little bit like a DFS GPP, where you do want some differentiation. You have the potential to get a little bit different and unique in your build. So anyway, the logic behind what we did, Shawn, I do think makes sense. I think it still fits. I think it's still something we can do. You just want me to admit that we shouldn't take a Josh Allen 403, so we could take so we wouldn't take a Hollywood Brown. We would have probably taken Jordan Love or something, and then Goff, and we'd already be off and running with 2 of our 4 quarterbacks. I think you're probably right.
One of the things we were hoping is that we would get the specific guys we wanted late. And with Hunter going very early, with Dobbins going very early, with Rashard Smith going in that turn, which is something that does happen some, with DJ Giddens not coming back, then you look at the team and you're like, the team isn't as exciting with Goddard and Brown, but the reality is that those picks actually might be better than the exciting picks that we kind of had set the thing up for. So I like what we've done. I definitely want to have those elite QB teams mixed in this season. And I think you have to put it on yourself to outdraft everybody else and build that super team. We'll see if Pickens, Judy, Reed, and Ayuk are the ways to accomplish that. Then it was a lot of fun doing the Superflex draft. Always awesome when you can start Superflex with Lamar Jackson. Excited about this main event. We're going to be doing more of those and talking more about them. And that'll do it for this draft edition of Stealing Bananas. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me, as always, is Ben Gretch. Make sure you are over there at Stealing Signals. You can sign up at bengretch.substack.com. We'd love to have you guys over at RotoViz as well. RE Radio 2025 for 10% off your 1-year subscription. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.